Silence! The cleaning lady doesn't have a voice here. The phrase cut through the auditorium's air like a knife, but Maria remained standing, her fingers trembling on the microphone she'd just taken from the director, as 500 people stared at her with a mixture of embarrassment and morbid curiosity. It was Thursday, 5:43 p.m., when Maria Hernandez's life split into a before and an after. The main auditorium of the City Cultural Center was packed for the annual presentation of the city's social projects, and she was there only to clear the water glasses left on the speaker's table. Her navy blue uniform was damp with sweat, not from the room's heat, but from the humiliation she'd just suffered in front of 500,000 important people, doctors, lawyers, businessmen, politicians, all looking at her as if she were an unwanted stain on expensive fabric. What no one knew, not even Maria had remembered until that moment, was that 22 years earlier on that same stage, a 17-year-old girl had won first place in the state oratory contest with a speech on the transformative power of education. Back then, Maria Sanchez, her maiden name, was the rising star of the public school she attended, the girl everyone said would go far, who would change the world with her words. But life has a cruel way of redirecting dreams. A premature marriage, 3 children in quick succession, a husband who disappeared one Tuesday morning, leaving only a 2-line note on the kitchen table, and Maria found herself transformed into 2 people, the mother who worked 16 hours a day cleaning offices to support her family, and the woman who had buried her dreams so deep she'd almost forgotten they ever existed. At that moment, under the blinding stage lights, with the foundation's director trying to wrest the microphone from her hands, and the audience murmuring derogatory comments, something awakened within Maria. It was as if a door sealed for decades had been opened by an unexpected gust of wind. Her hands stopped trembling, her spine straightened, and when she spoke, her voice echoed through the auditorium with a clarity and power that silenced even her fiercest critics. You think I don't have a voice here because I clean your dirty glasses, because I sweep up the papers you throw on the floor of your realized dreams. Maria's voice cut through the silence like a crystal bell. Well, I'll tell you what it's like to have no voice. It's working 3 shifts so your children have something to eat while you debate theories about poverty in air-conditioned rooms. It's hearing your children ask why their mother always arrives late at school meetings, because she's cleaning the rooms where other parents plan the bright future of their children. The foundation's director, Dr. Henry Miller, a 60-year-old man accustomed to commanding any environment he stepped into, was paralyzed. He had just publicly humiliated an employee, expecting her to lower her head and return to her place of social invisibility. He hadn't expected her to transform into a force of nature before his eyes. Memory carried Maria back to 2001. She was 17 and ascending the same stage to receive the first-place trophy in the state oratory contest. Her speech had moved even the strictest judges, speaking about how education could break cycles of poverty and transform entire communities. That day, she wore a blue dress her mother had sewn especially for the occasion, working late nights after her shift at the textile factory. Maria will go far. This girl has a gift for words, said her Portuguese teacher, Mr. Joseph, a black man with graying hair who saw potential where others saw just another student from the periphery. He was the one who entered her in the contest, who believed she could compete equally with students from private schools, who sat in the front row that memorable day, applauding standing up when she lifted the trophy. But life happened. At 18, Maria fell in love with Carlos, a handsome young man full of promises who worked as a salesman in an appliance store. At 19, she was pregnant with Julia. At 20, she was married and pregnant again, this time with Peter. At 22, Miguel arrived, and Maria no longer remembered the feeling of getting on a stage and having hundreds of people hanging on her every word. Carlos had a knack for making her feel small, not with physical violence, but with that kind of emotional erosion that eats away at self-esteem drop by drop, day after day. Why do you want to study, Maria? You already have everything you need here at home, he always said whenever she mentioned the possibility of returning to school. Those ideas in your head will only bring trouble to our family. The day he left was also the day Maria discovered that he had plundered the savings she had been secretly building with the spare change from her cleaning job. $340 that represented months of saving, dreams of maybe one day being able to afford a technical course, a fragile hope of rebuilding what she had lost. That Tuesday morning, Maria found only a note on the kitchen table. It didn't work out. Take good care of the children. Carlos. 20 years of marriage summarized in 9 words of farewell. That's when she started working at the City Cultural Center as a cleaner. She needed a job that offered stability, food vouchers, and basic health insurance for her children. For 5 years she swept the halls of that institution, cleaned the bathrooms, organized the rooms after events, always invisible, always silent, always present only as a shadow, ensuring everything was perfect for the important people who arrived for their meetings and lectures. But at that moment, with the microphone in her hands, and 500 people looking at her with a mixture of shock and curiosity, Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in over 2 decades, the transformative power of the right words spoken at the right time. Do you know what I learned cleaning these hallways for 5 years? Her voice gained even more intensity. I learned that you talk a lot about social inclusion while treating as invisible the people who make it possible for you to hold your meetings in clean and organized environments. You debate public policies to combat poverty, but when a poor woman tries to speak, you tell her to shut up because she doesn't have a voice here. Dr. Henry felt the cold sweat dripping down his forehead. In 30 years of leading the foundation, he had dealt with politicians, businessmen, intellectuals, but he had never felt so disarmed as at that moment, facing that woman in her navy blue uniform, who seemed to have found a strength he didn't know where it came from. Maria looked at the audience and saw faces beginning to change. The initial hostility was giving way to something different, perhaps guilt, perhaps recognition, perhaps just genuine curiosity to hear what else she had to say. My name is Maria Hernandez. I'm 43 years old. I have 3 children, and 22 years ago, I was on this same stage receiving first place in the state oratory competition. She paused, letting the information echo through the auditorium. That day, I was 17 and believed I could change the world with my words. Today, I clean the floor where others walk towards their dreams, but that doesn't mean I've forgotten how to dream. It was at that moment that Maria spotted a familiar face in the 5th row, hair completely gray now, wrinkles that didn't exist 2 decades ago, but the smile was the same. Joseph Santos, her former Portuguese teacher. He looked at her with tearful eyes and made the same gesture he used to make when she was a teenager, a thumbs up, signaling that she was doing well, that she should continue. The teacher's presence triggered a cascade of memories. Maria remembered the afternoons she stayed after school to practice oratory in the empty classroom, with Mr. Joseph sitting in the front row, taking notes and giving suggestions. Words are a powerful weapon, Maria, but only in the hands of those who know how to use them responsibly, he used to say. And you have that gift. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Now, 22 years later, Maria finally understood what he meant. Words weren't just sounds organized in a logical sequence, they were bridges that connected hearts, lanterns that illuminated consciences, seeds that could germinate profound and lasting changes. Do you want to know what the most important social project this foundation can develop is? Maria continued, her voice echoing with an authority that surprised even herself. It's recognizing that every person who works here, regardless of their position, has a story, has dreams, has something valuable to contribute. It's understanding that true social inclusion begins by seeing and valuing those who are right in front of us, not just the statistics in the pretty reports you present. Dr. Henry realized he had 2 choices. He could insist on silencing Maria and consolidate his image as a small man in a situation that had gotten out of his control, or he could acknowledge that he was witnessing something extraordinary and have the wisdom to let it happen. For the first time in many years, he chose humility. Maria looked directly at him, and in a tone that mixed firmness with compassion, said, Dr. Henry, you've known me for 5 years as the woman who cleans your office every Tuesday and Thursday, but you never asked my full name, never wanted to know if I had children, never showed curiosity about my story. Today, You tried to silence me because you thought I didn't have the right to use this microphone. But know that I respect the work you do here. I recognize the importance of this institution, and that's why I believe we can do better." The silence in the auditorium was deafening. 500 people held their breath, waiting to see how the situation would resolve itself. Maria felt the weight of the moment, the responsibility of not wasting that unique opportunity that life had placed in her hands. 5 years ago, when I started working here, my dream was simple: to be able to support my children with dignity. But cleaning these hallways, organizing these rooms, listening to fragments of your conversations about social projects, education, community transformation, something was awakening within me. I started to remember that one day I also had bigger dreams. Maria closed her eyes for a moment and allowed the most precious memory of her adolescence to surface. It was the day of the oratory competition finals. She had woken up at 5 in the morning, her stomach churning with nervousness. Her mother, Rosa, had gotten up even earlier to iron her blue dress and make a special snack for her to take. "My daughter is going to rock today," she had said, kissing her forehead affectionately. "I couldn't study, but you're going to show everyone that a girl from the suburbs also knows how to speak beautifully." That day, Maria had spoken about education as a tool for social transformation, but what truly touched the judges' hearts was the passion with which she defended her ideas, the way she painted vivid pictures with words, how she made people feel they too could be part of the solution. "When I was 17, Maria continued, opening her eyes and sweeping the auditorium with her gaze, "I believed words could change the world. Then life taught me the world is more complicated than I imagined. But today, at this moment, I rediscovered something important. Words don't change the world at once, but they can change one person at a time, and one transformed person can transform a family. A transformed family can transform a community, and so on." It was at this point that Maria did something unexpected. She addressed the camera directly, which was recording the event for online streaming, and spoke as if she were talking to a close friend. "If you're watching this from home, maybe on your phone or computer, and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're also someone who buried their dreams to survive, who forgot who they were before life tightened the screws, I want you to know it's never too late to rediscover your voice. Please subscribe to this Foundation's channel, turn on the notification bell, because from today we're going to work together to show that real transformation happens when real people connect with purposes bigger than themselves. You're not alone on this journey, and your story deserves to be heard too." The gesture was so natural, so genuine, that even the people in the audience felt included in the intimate conversation Maria established with the online viewers. It was as if she had managed to transform a public speech into a personal conversation with each person watching her. Dr. Henry watched all this with a mixture of admiration and deep reflection on his own journey. He had started his career at the City Cultural Center with noble ideals, genuinely interested in making a difference in the community. But over the years, he had allowed himself to be seduced by bureaucracy, by protocols, by the safe distance that hierarchies provided. When was the last time he had truly talked to an employee? When was the last time he had genuinely been interested in the stories of the people who worked alongside him? Maria noticed the change in his expression and decided to build a bridge. "Henry, I know you started working here believing you could make a difference. I see it in your eyes when you talk about the center's projects, but perhaps it's time to remember that the most important projects are people, and the people closest to us are the ones who most need to be seen." Then something unexpected happened. Dr. Henry approached Maria, extended his hand to greet her and said, his voice choked with emotion, "Maria, I'm sorry for not seeing you all these years. I'm sorry for trying to silence you today, and thank you for reminding me why I chose to work here." The handshake between the two triggered a round of applause that started timidly in the front row, where Mr. Joseph was sitting, and spread throughout the auditorium like an irresistible wave. It wasn't the protocol applause of a corporate event, but the kind of applause that arises when people recognize that they have just witnessed something truly special. Maria felt tears rolling down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness or humiliation. They were tears of reconnection with herself, of a reunion with a part of her identity that had been dormant for so long that she almost believed it had died. "There's one last thing I'd like to share with you," she said, waiting for the applause to subside. "My 3 children are watching this broadcast from home. Julia is 24 and works as a nursing technician. Peter is 22 and is in his final year of engineering. Michael is 20 and studies pedagogy. For all these years, I was so worried about giving them what I didn't have that I ended up forgetting to show them who I really was before they existed." Maria paused and looked directly at the camera. "Julia, Peter, Michael, your mother is not just the woman who cleaned floors for 5 years to ensure you had what you needed. I am also the woman who once dreamed of changing the world with words, and who today rediscovered that she can still do it. I hope you are proud not only of what I did for you, but of who I choose to be from now on." The moment was so touching and intimate that many people in the audience found themselves wiping their own eyes. It was impossible not to be moved by this mother who, upon finding her own voice again, was also teaching her children a powerful lesson about resilience, reinvention, and the courage to start over. Mr. Joseph rose from the 5th row and walked toward the stage. At 72, retired for a decade, he had attended the event by chance, accompanying a former teaching colleague. He never imagined he would meet his brightest former student in this way. "Maria," he said, mounting the stage with some difficulty, but with eyes shining with pride, "do you remember what I used to say about the power of words? That the word is a powerful weapon, but only in the hands of those who know how to use it responsibly." Maria replied immediately, as if they were verses memorized in childhood. "Exactly, and today you proved you never forgot that lesson. More than that, you showed that life's most difficult experiences don't destroy our gifts, they refine them." The reunion between teacher and student on stage was the most moving moment of the afternoon. 2 generations embracing, one representing the wisdom that plants seeds, the other representing the courage that makes those seeds germinate even in barren soil. Dr. Henry approached the two and made a proposal that surprised everyone. "Maria, I'd like to offer you a new position here at the City Cultural Center. We want to create a program to recognize and empower our staff, and I believe you would be the ideal person to coordinate it. You'd have the opportunity to use your experience and talent to do exactly what you spoke about today, to see and value people." Maria looked at Dr. Henry, then at Mr. Joseph, then at the audience watching her expectantly, and finally at the camera that continued to broadcast everything live. She knew that her answer at that moment would define not only her future but also the kind of example she wanted to set for her children and for all those who, like her, had buried their dreams to survive. "Dr. Henry, I accept your proposal, but with one condition. I want this program to be developed in partnership with people who live in situations similar to mine. I don't want to be the only voice representing those who have no voice. I want to create a chorus of voices that strengthen each other." Maria's proposal sparked a new round of applause, even more intense than before. It was evident that she had touched a sensitive point, the need for genuine, not merely symbolic, representation. At that moment, Maria finally understood that her journey hadn't been a detour from her original dreams, but a preparation for even bigger dreams. At 17, she wanted to change the world with beautiful words and well-structured theaters. At 43, she discovered she could change the world with truths lived on her own skin, with the authority of someone who speaks from first-hand experience. When the event ended, Maria was surrounded by dozens of people who wanted to talk to her, exchange contacts, learn more about her story. But the most important conversation took place in the City Cultural Center parking lot, when she called home and heard Julia's emotional voice on the other end of the line. "Mom, we were watching everything here at home. Peter and Michael cried like babies when you spoke to us on television. We always knew you were special, but today you showed the whole world." That night, Maria arrived home and found her 3 children waiting in the living room, with a homemade chocolate cake, her favorite, and a makeshift banner hanging on the wall. "Congratulations, Mom, for teaching us that it's never too late to shine." As she cut the cake and listened to her children tell how proud they felt watching her presentation, Maria reflected on the winding paths life sometimes forces us to take. Perhaps she needed to go through all those years of silence to appreciate the moment when her voice finally emerged. Perhaps she needed to experience invisibility to understand the importance of seeing others. Perhaps she needed to get lost to find herself in a more complete and mature way. 3 months later, the Voices That Transform program created by Maria had already identified 15 City Cultural Center employees with extraordinary talents and stories. There was the security guard who wrote poetry, the receptionist who spoke 4 languages, the driver who had social projects in his community, the cook who developed nutritious recipes for vulnerable children. The City Cultural Center transformed into a completely different environment. The hierarchies still existed, but there was now a culture of recognition and appreciation that made each person feel seen and respected. Dr. Henry, in turn, discovered that leading people was much more rewarding when you knew their stories and recognized their potential. Maria never wore the navy blue uniform again. Now she arrived at the City Cultural Center wearing clothes that reflected her new position, but mainly that reflected her rediscovered self-esteem. But she made a point of having lunch every day in the employee cafeteria, of knowing each new person's name, of remembering that her strength came precisely from her connection to her roots. A year after that transformative day, Maria was invited to give a speech at the same state oratory contest where she had won as a teenager. This time she didn't speak as a young woman full of theories about social transformation, but as a woman who had lived the complexities of real life and had found a way to transform difficulties into wisdom, silences into powerful voices, invisibility into protagonism. Life will try to convince you that your dreams have an expiration date, she said to the young participants in the contest. It will try to make you believe that certain opportunities only appear once, that certain doors close forever, but I'm here to tell you that's not true. Our dreams don't die, they hibernate, and when the time is right, when we develop the necessary maturity and courage, they awaken stronger than ever. That afternoon, as Maria descended from the stage after her presentation, a 16-year-old girl approached her with eyes shining with emotion. "Mrs. Hernandez, I also live in the suburbs, and my mother works as a cleaning lady. Sometimes I'm afraid that my dreams are too big for a girl like me, but after hearing your story, I understood that our dreams aren't too big. We are sometimes the ones who feel too small for them." Maria hugged the girl and whispered in her ear, "Always remember, you're not too small for any dream. You're just preparing to grow to the height of your dreams." Leaving the event that day, Maria looked up at the sky and thanked all the circumstances that had led her there, even the most painful ones. She understood that her story wasn't about a woman who lost her dreams and then found them again, but about someone who discovered that true dreams aren't the ones we imagine at 17, but the ones we build with the wisdom and experience that only life can give us. Today, Maria Hernandez is nationally recognized as one of the leading voices in the fight for the appreciation and inclusion of workers in situations of social vulnerability. She has lectured in dozens of cities, inspired the creation of similar programs in other institutions, and become a reference for thousands of people who, like her, believed for a time that their dreams had died. But if you ask Maria what the most important moment of her entire journey was, she won't hesitate to answer it was that Thursday at 5:43 p.m., when she held a microphone with trembling hands and decided she would never again let anyone say she didn't have a voice. It was the moment she stopped asking permission to exist and started occupying the space that was always rightfully hers. Because sometimes life teaches us that the greatest act of courage isn't never falling, but getting up as many times as necessary, and that true transformation happens not when we achieve our original dreams, but when we discover even bigger and more meaningful dreams than those we once imagined possible.